Obviously, with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, we have him getting bitten by a spider on a field trip, which, when you think about it, is pretty crazy that a high-tech lab would not only let high schoolers in, but wouldn't really be keeping tabs on those potentially life-endangering spiders.
I'm gonna cut in real quick. Is this where we're drawing, like, the realism card? Is this where we're gonna sit and be like, oh, comic books and movies, they're not very realistic, this is the same movie where the guy like proceeds to who gets bit by that spider proceeds to put on spandex and punch people in the face.
It's easy to forget that Tom Holland has been our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man for around 4 years now, after his first appearance in Captain America: Civil War. Since then, there have been some heated debates about whether he is a good Spider-Man. How does he compare to the OGs, his predecessors? And we're not just talking about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, we're talking about the OG 1977 can barely climb on walls Spider-Man.
Oh baby.
Oh baby. My name is Callum, and today I have my wonderful buddy Zach, my fellow Spidey fan. Are you prepared for some heated debates on the best screen adaptation of Spider-Man?
I've never been more prepared for anything in my life, as you know. I am a massive Spider-Man fan. I have a Spider-Man Far From Home calendar hanging up on my wall, and on it says, today is the day.
I just like this image in my mind where you've just got, like, in red marker, the day of reckoning. We're gonna look at the actors who've played Spider-Man, the many events that have happened to each iteration of the Wicked Web Slinger, and who is arguably the most powerful. By the end of this conversation, I'm pretty sure we all know who's gonna be crowned the best. It's Japanese Spider-Man with the Megazord. Japanese action shows have no chill.
Spider-Man.
Okay, so there have been many iterations of the Wicked Web Slinger. You've got Peter Parker gracing our screens from before some of us new fans were born with the likes of Spider-Man: The Dragon's Challenge. What's the earliest iteration of Spider-Man you can remember, Zach?
In terms of the live-action movies, I'd have to say the Tobey Maguire, the first Spider-Man movie, Tobey Maguire's.
Yeah.
But in terms of like actually watching Spider-Man, the first thing I was exposed to was the 1960s cartoon, like the original one.
Really?
Because my parents would put on retro like TV channels, and that would come on, and the official like old school theme songs. Oh, it's so good.
I remember the first Spider-Man I was introduced to was even the 1997 animated series. The theme tune that you can still bang your head to. Like, I'm pretty sure that the guitar theme to the theme song of that was just improvised on the spot as well.
I'm pretty sure. I think it was. Yeah, it was a guitarist from Aerosmith did that. He just played out a riff, and it turned out great.
The thing is, though, is to most fans of Spider-Man, the main contenders for best on-screen Spider-Man will be Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man from the Sam Raimi trilogy, Andrew Garfield from Sony's Amazing Spider-Man, and Tom Holland from the recent Marvel outings. So let's touch on Tobey Maguire first. Some could say that this film trilogy was started the 2000s renaissance of superhero films, and during that time, it was still trying to find a way to keep heroes grounded in reality while still showing off some of that comic book cheese. I'm still a big fan of the original J. Jonah Jameson.
I'm pretty sure everyone is. We all love J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. The only problem with that, though, is that they cast perfection too early. So now with every subsequent Spider-Man movie and just Spider-Man thing in general, you gotta wonder who's gonna be J. Jonah Jameson and how come they're not gonna be as good as J.K. Simmons.
Obviously, with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, we have him getting bitten by a spider on a field trip, which, when you think about it, is pretty crazy that a high-tech lab would not only let high schoolers in, but wouldn't really be keeping tabs on those potentially life-endangering spiders. The one who's doing the field trip just turns around and is like, it's nothing.
Sorry, I'm gonna cut in real quick. Is this where we're drawing like the realism card? Is this where we're gonna sit and be like, oh, comic books and movies, they're not very realistic, this is the same movie where the guy like proceeds to who gets bit by that spider proceeds to put on spandex and punch people in the face. You're gonna say that it's a little crazy that they're not keeping watch of a spider?
All I'm saying is, imagine if that thing got out into New York and started multiplying. We'd have more versions of Spider-Man than Into the Spider-Verse. Spider Grandma? Yes, please. All right, well, Tobey Maguire, okay, he goes through high school to college, loses Uncle Ben, faces off against Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, the new Green Goblin, Sandman, Venom, all while dealing with the concept of becoming an adult, balancing his personal life and superhero duties, you know, typical Spider-Man themed sort of stuff. Personally, I adored these films as a kid, but I never really believed that Tobey Maguire was a high school student in the first film.
No, he looked like he was 35.
Like, whenever he was facing off against Flash in the corridors, it looked like they had just broken into a high school just to have a brawl. Peter Parker from those films was very much a product of their time. I mean, Tobey Maguire was the perfect image of a true nerd back then. He was nervous, he was shy. I don't think he was particularly good at quips either. I don't know.
I feel like whenever Tobey Maguire put the mask on, I couldn't believe that he was Spider-Man making quips. Like, obviously, Spider-Man was great in those movies, but like, just kind of felt like a really awkward, like, white dad behind that mask. Just like, it's you who's out, Gobby, out of your mind. Whoa, am I right, fellas?
Oh, wow, epic burst.
Oh, snap.
Do you remember whenever he was facing up against the wrestler Bone Crusher in the first film, and he asked if his husband made that outfit?
It was super homophobic,
yeah. But Andrew Garfield came in The Amazing Spider-Man, and this iteration of Peter Parker was very different personality-wise compared to Tobey Maguire's interpretation. You know, he was cool, he was a hipster, he had a skateboard, for crying out loud.
Oh, man. I want to see his tech deck collection.
I mean, I remember Garfield said during a panel, the reason why he was so different was because the sort of definition of nerds had changed so much. A lot of people kind of don't think that Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was the best iteration. But in my opinion, Andrew Garfield's wry humor, like, he didn't just battle his enemies, he roasted them to death.
Oh, I thought he was amazing in the suit. Like, his clips were fantastic. And then I'm sitting there thinking, like, no, but now I have the opposite problem with you that I did with Tobey Maguire. You're too cool. I can't see you getting bullied. I'd bully the guys bullying you. That doesn't make any sense. Guy's skateboarding to class and people are like, oh, you're a nerd. And he's like, what? Dude, he probably had sex with your mom.
I mean, you gotta admit that Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was really charming. I mean, he had such amazing chemistry with Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy.
I'd kiss him like Gwen Stacy if he was that charming to me.
Absolutely. Their interactions were some of the best parts of that film. Comparing it to Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield got game. He got game.
Oh, yeah. Comparing that to Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst is like comparing like two alive people to two dead people. I'm sorry. That relationship was flat in the Sam Raimi trilogy.
All right, well, Tom Holland was the youngest iteration of the web slinger. He was the perfect combination of this, like, young, wide-eyed innocence that really focused on him maturing and finding himself. I mean, he was the student in those films. He was surrounded by all these different Avengers who were war veterans, basically. Yeah. And him being that young, him being that inexperienced, allowed us to really relate to him so much. You know, everyone kind of goes through adolescence, and he was shy, he was nervous without being too awkward. And because Marvel knew that everyone was familiar with the Spider-Man origin story, they could really jump straight in with him being in Civil War. They didn't have to gratuitously cap Uncle Ben for the third time in a row. And the big difference between the likes of Tom Holland's Peter Parker and the last few iterations is his heavy push into adolescence, you know? It's the plots that revolve around him going to prom and field trips and so on. He's very much a student. He's kind of relying on other people a lot more. In the other films, Peter Parker was very much independent. I mean, obviously, because he wasn't attached to the rest of Marvel. But how do each of these guys compare in terms of their stats? There are three things I kind of want to measure here when we compare these three iterations. Their strength, their durability, and them demonstrating their smarts, right? First, we got their strength. Let's look at the heaviest thing that each Spider-Man has lifted. A staple among Spider-Man visuals is that he tends to be able to lift up a car, which typically weighs about 2,800 pounds. Andrew Garfield does it in Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Electro's first appearance, and he does it with relative ease. He's also able to stop a bus from overturning at the start of the film in a van chase scene. Arguably, I think that's the weakest Spider-Man, because the thing with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is they put such emphasis on his speed and how quick he was. You compare that to the likes of Tom Holland, he's able to like keep a close clock tower from falling in Far From Home, which is pretty damn huge. Like, I would think it was probably over 200,000 pounds at least.
Yeah, not only that, he also holds that collapsed building up a little bit in Homecoming, and then also in Homecoming, he doesn't keep the boat that falls apart together, but he holds it for like at least a few seconds, and that's the Staten Island Ferry. That's like 3 million pounds per arm or something that he's holding. That should like tear him in half in like a second, but he manages to keep it together for a few seconds before Iron Man steps in.
Absolutely. Tobey Maguire, we can see him like tossing a couple of metal beams away with relative ease to save Mary Jane in Spider-Man 2. But if you're talking about people holding things together, you can't not talk about like Tobey Maguire stopping the train. If we're talking about durability, first he tries to stop that train by literally using his legs against the wooden tracks. And then obviously he tries to stop the train with his webs. You know, he webs the buildings and he uses himself as the tension point. Now let's say that this train was going like around 30 to 55 miles per hour. There are about 6 train cars, right? Each weighing about 85,000 pounds. It's safe to say that any normal human would have been splattered all over those tracks. And the thing is as well, it only takes about 82 pounds of force to rip a human arm out of its socket. He has to be pretty durable to come out of that and still be fighting at the end of the film. The other thing as well is that Tobey Maguire straight up falls from skyscrapers whenever he loses his power and gets up easily as if it's like an inconvenience. And he also takes a flipping grenade to the face whenever he's facing Green Goblin in the first one. Andrew Garfield, I'm pretty sure he has a different kind of durability. Like in Amazing Spider-Man 2, he's facing off against Electro in this power plant and he takes literal electric shocks to the chest. But the thing is Electro has like absorbed enough power from the city to cause blackouts, right? You could argue that Spider-Man is being hit with something in the megavolt range. He should be a crispy spider ready to slap some sauce on this boy. Some salt, some seasoning, you know?
Man, is that Andrew Garfield a la mode? Delicious. Yes,
yes!
Very good.
Andrew Garfield a la mode!
Can you please pass the Parmesan? Yes, thank you.
Tom Holland is by far, I think, the most durable out of all of them. Like, this guy gets sent flying by a plane in his battle against Vulture, and he just gets back up. He does like receive a black eye or two, but the thing is, he doesn't get any broken bones.
This guy gets called Penis Parker and doesn't even cry once. This is something else.
Also mentioning the boat scene as well, he should have been torn apart there. And finally, which one of these Spidey boys has the big brain? Like Tobey Maguire, he did show he had smarts to make his own suit, and he worked with the likes of Otto Octavius.
He knows how to sew.
We never see we don't see him putting those smarts to too much practical use outside of like his work with Otto and going to college, and mostly that's because a lot of his Spider-Man powers were all natural. You know, he didn't need web shooters like the other two needed. He could just produce webs just straight up from his arms and stuff like that.
The Spider-Man doesn't usually have like a mystery aspect to him, but like you see him using his smarts outside of like actual fights to try and like help him figure something out, right? Like in the Amazing Spider-Man, they had like no pun intended, amazing example of him doing this when he goes down into the lizard's lair and makes a big web for him to feeling around for whenever the lizard like gets into the lair, so feel the web vibrate and he knows which path to take. Like, that's genius.
Exactly. And personally, I think Andrew Garfield is the most homebrew of Spider-Man, because this guy not only creates his own suit, like he screen prints his own suit, he makes super strong webs. There's a whole montage about him developing it. He even makes police scanners out of his Xperia phone. And I struggle to recall a moment where there's a more overpowered Spidey sense moment than when Andrew Garfield like saves everyone from being electrocuted with Electro when he's in Times Square. You know, there's like 40 people there and he just like predicts the movement of everybody and saves everyone, right? This part arguably speaks to Andrew Garfield not being the smartest. The guy uses Bing. You know, Comparing all that, though, I think Tom Holland could arguably be one of the smartest. He's coming out making his own webs. You know, he started making his equipment before Stark got involved, and then he was able to pick up where Stark left off, building his own suits with Tony's resources.
I think Tom's is very smart, but the thing is like all of the cool, like, you know, Spider-Man-y, like gadget stuff that we would usually see Spider-Man make, he doesn't really make it. Like, he makes the web shooters and the actual web fluid himself, yes, but that's the thing I loved about Homecoming, the MCU, is they bring in a lot of the Spider-Man gadgets that Spider-Man has. People who know the comics and like some of the other cartoons know that Spider-Man's got gadgets.
Maybe Andrew Garfield could be doing the exact same thing if he was working under Tony Stark as well. I'm going to ask you this, though, Zach.
Yeah.
If you were to pit all of these guys toe-to-toe, which one do you think you would win? Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, all them versus Battle Royale style.
Personally, I have to say Tom Holland. It's not like it would be a landslide victory. It would definitely be a struggle, and they'd all like put up a pretty solid fight. I don't know if he's the smartest one, but I think he definitely is probably the quickest on his feet. He's a very sharp mind when it comes to in the field work. You know, when it comes to the tech stuff, maybe Andrew Garfield's got more of an edge on him. I think overall, in terms of like battle smarts and with like his reflexes and quick on his feet, I think Tom Holland takes it, and I think he takes it in strength too. He can lift way more, which means he also packs a much bigger punch. In terms of like a fist fight, when he was fighting Winter Soldier in Civil War, his big heavy metal arm, he catches it with one hand like it's nothing.
I would argue I'm not too sure about the battle experience though, because see, the thing is, Tom Holland loses to the likes of Captain America and stuff like that because of his inexperience, right?
You also have to factor in that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is the only one who's fighting people like that. We can't give that comparison with the other two because this is the first time Spider-Man's been in a more expanded universe that isn't just him. Who did Tobey Maguire fight? He fought Norman Osborn, Doc Ock, Harry Osborn, Sandman, and Venom, all of which are just people who happen to get powers. It's not like they were experienced fighters before and they had years of like superhero training like Captain America did. They were all pretty fresh too, and they were mostly just using gadgets. Sandman would work from a distance and use his sand. Venom had the symbiote, was just a boost in strength. They're not too experienced in terms of hand-to-hand combat. Same with Andrew Garfield. Who did he fight? He fought Dr. Connors, the lizard, who was just a scientist who injected himself with the lizard formula. He's not combat experienced. He doesn't have any like past experience with that kind of stuff. And then in the second movie, he fights Electro, who's just some nerd, Jamie Foxx,
some nerd
who gets the electro powers, and he fights using his electricity, right? He doesn't get super close. And then he also fights Harry Osborn as the Green Goblin, who works from a glider. Tom Holland's Spider-Man is the only one who's gone up against the likes of the other Avengers, but Tom Holland put up a fight against the other Avengers and against Thanos.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you were to give Tom Holland his instant kill mode from his suit, I think it's a no-brainer. He would just kill the others.
That might give him a little bit of an edge.
It's like the scene from Indiana Jones where the other two are like flaring about and shooting webs, and Tom just pulls out a gun and shoots them both. He replaces the web and the web shooters with just bullets or something.
Spider Glock.
Yeah, Spider Glock. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. But of course, this doesn't even account for like the future Spider-Man as well. I think so far, Tom Holland's been winning pretty much all of these bouts. In our opinion, of course, I'm sure we're gonna get slaughtered in the comments. I mean, that's the thing though, right? Is that the reason why Tom Holland could be the greatest Spider-Man is ultimately it comes down to the fact that he's more connected. He's able to face all these other Avengers, and he has to go toe-to-toe with all these different people, and he's ultimately been given more screen time. Yeah. Personally, I think Andrew Garfield would have been amazing as Spider-Man, but he just wasn't given the time, and the second film was just rushed. You know, if you take a step back, you got to admit that Tom Holland's character has so many opportunities for future Spider-Man stories. His rise to adulthood is going to be incredible. He'll probably end up forming his own team. He'll be able to lean more and more on what happens in the comics, and they won't be recycling the growing into responsibility trope that's been fairly consistent throughout all the current MCU stories forever. He's going to face even greater threats and more difficult baddies than just what the other two have been able to face. Yeah. I also think that all the other titles from Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, especially with Andrew Garfield, were all too focused on bringing in the new big bad to attract people to the theaters. But with Marvel, they can look at the bigger picture and they can develop him over time.
Yeah, because especially considering like he only started in like 2016 with Civil War. He's already had 5 movies.
Overall, I think Tom Holland's coming out as the smartest, the strongest. I mean, he's racking up new suits in the space of a couple of hours. He's taken on thousands of enemies at once, and current Avengers, I mean, something previous Spider-Man have never been able to do. He has the most access to equipment, but he also has the most opportunity to shine.
And plus, you got to consider that age too, because he's only like 15. By the time Homecoming like was around, Peter Parker was 15 in that movie. So you've really got to think like now he's like 16 or 17 in the current MCU like timeline, but like he's got years to grow.
Would he be able to face off against Japanese Spider-Man's mech? I mean, I'm not so sure.
You do not mess with Spider-Man and Retardon.
Spider-Man. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I want to hear your opinion on which Spider-Man is the greatest of all time. Fight us in the comments. We dare you. Let us know in the comments below, on Twitter, wherever. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to follow us so you can get in on this conversation. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.